Hello, friends, and welcome back to Market Shares. I'm your host, Tony Blodgett, and this is a call that I've been trying to put together for a while. This is a treat. You're going to love this guy. This is my good friend, Dave Gallegos. Dave is the president of Zenith Home Loans. He's out in the Denver, Colorado market. We met years back, as I talk about all the time on this program, at a coaching event. We've spent a lot of time together discussing the industry. I have a lot of respect for this guy and how he runs things, and I think there's some things that all of us can take away. So, Dave, welcome to Market Shares. I'm glad you could join us.
Thanks for having me, Tony. It's great to be here. I really appreciate it. It'll be fun.
Yeah, no, I think it is going to be fun.
You and I always have a good time together.
We do always have a good time together. And I got a lot of respect for, the business that you've built. And, when we first met, I think you were right in the process or had just really established Zenith Home Loans. And, we're kind of getting that built out. You'd worked for some other companies with some different arrangements. And this one, was a big commitment on your part, to launch this. And, through some very challenging markets, you've had a lot of success. And, you've done some things with your business and with your team that I really appreciate. I've kind of, and we've talked about. And so I wanted to share some of those things with our audience here today, because a lot of the work you have done in the past is with newer loan officers. I think, the loan officers that are with you, even the ones that have been with you for a very long time, are people that you brought in and taught the business from the very beginning. And now they've really grown to be great producers. And then you also put an effort over the last few years to bring some newer people into the industry. And I think we can talk about, is now a good time to enter the mortgage industry? I know you have some opinions about that, but I would love to walk through it. I watched an interview that you did with Dave Savage where you talked about the paces that you put a new loan officer through. And I feel like we're in a market right now where there's a lot of loan officers who've been doing this for a long time. And I'm sure you remember, Todd Duncan used to always say this. He's like, are you 20 years in the business, or have you been in the business 20 years doing the same thing every year, right? So yeah, 1 year, 20 times. And so, unfortunately, there's some people who I don't think, have structured their business in a way, or just the significant changes that have happened over the last few years have left them like, gosh, I almost feel like a new loan officer. I have all the knowledge, I know products, I know programs, but my ability to get out there and bring in the business, like the cheese moved, and I haven't been able to find it. And I was just thinking back to, like, if I was new today, or if I wanted to rebuild my business, I just remember that interview you did with Dave, and I know you had a lot of good ideas, and I wanted to share some of those with the audience. And then I got a bunch of other topics that I want to go over with you, because you bring such a cool perspective. So let's just jump into it, if you don't mind, Dave. First of all, let's just get a little background. How long you been? Have you always been in the Denver market? How long have you been in the mortgage space?
Always in the Denver market, and I got in the business in '97, and I worked at like 5 really bad broker shops in 2.5 years and started my own company after that. I was like, screw it, I can do this myself. And I started a little 3-person broker shop. I had a partner. He quit after 6 months. We're still buddies, but it was like, wow, you work way harder than I thought you did doing loans. And so ups and downs in the first 3 years, I really struggled learning how to make money. I was a really good producer everywhere I was, and I was still the top producer at my company with like a dozen loan officers. I was out producing the dozen. And but I couldn't figure out how to make money owning the company. Like, running the business is the classic E-Myth thing, which is like, right, being a good technician doesn't qualify you to be a good owner. And in my case, it couldn't have been truer. And so I struggled to pick that up, but I joined a correspondent lender. I didn't even know what correspondent lending was. And in the end of 2002, and he taught me how to read a P&L and how to like be profitable, which, made a difference and stuff. But in all of that time, actually, the first brand new guy that I hired with no experience, I brought in during that time. And he's still with me. I'm very fortunate. We're partners today. He has an ownership interest in the company. I guess I work for him more than he works for me, but truth be told, right? And but he's still a really solid producer. And we did the things that I teach now, and I still think to your point about this being a different time for the people who, like my cheese moved. How come I don't have any business? And when all of us first started, we'd do almost anything, right? Like there's almost nothing we wouldn't try and almost nothing we wouldn't do to get deals. Saturdays, Sundays, hitting open houses, going to builders, like meeting somebody at their office at 7:00. I used to do crazy. I drove down to freaking like Colorado Springs, the other side of Colorado Springs. Like I'd spend my Saturdays driving around town to take loan apps, and I obviously don't recommend that anymore. But there was almost nothing I wouldn't do when I was really, really hungry. And we all had like this amazing 2020, 2021. Aren't we done talking about this? And so it's harder now. But the same things still make money. The same things that we used to do, we don't really want to do those things anymore. It's like, I don't want to have to do that. And it's like, okay, well, that's how you get business.
Got to do something.
One of my guys was saying he went through this, and now he's like figured it out. Because 22, 23, he had newer guy in the industry, brand new guy that we hired with no experience. He worked in ops for a year, which is really what I recommend for brand new people now. It's like, you got to find a way to get into this business without, I know that you don't want to learn the business, you don't want to like put in your time, but it's worth it to learn the process first and how a loan works and all of that stuff. And then maybe be on a team and then go off on your own. But this guy just figured out, it's like, okay, because I had 6 or 7 realtors. I thought they were really good in 22, 23. And then like the second half of 23, like, I'm not getting any business. Like, why isn't this working? It's like, you can never, Tony, am I wrong? You can never stop prospecting for realtor business. You always need more realtors because the realtors you do in business with don't stay in the business.
Yeah. Well,
they get married, they get divorced, they get out of the business, they have a baby. I mean, all of those are the reasons why, or they become broker owners. Like my best freaking referral partner owns one of the biggest brokerages in Denver today. He's not sending any leads to me.
Right.
Anybody on my team. He's like, I'm not doing deals anymore. So like, that's the business.
Yeah. Well, I talked about this on a podcast with Ken and Patrick and Ryan the other day, which is, that's exactly it, right? Like, you've been doing this for a long time. You had 7, 8, 9, 10 agents that were amazing and they were feeding you business, but now something's changed in their business, and now you can't rely on them. So you always have to be prospecting for new business. I want to go back though real quick. So you talked about the challenges that you had in learning the financial side of this business, right? Making the P&L work and the financial side. I just, it made me think of this. This wasn't on my list of questions, but how important do you think that it is that a loan officer, if they're not running a P&L, they're not running a branch, but how important is it for loan officers to understand the economics of a mortgage transaction and how a branch or a company operates? Like, do you think that that's important information for even loan officers to understand?
You know what? I used to not think it was as important as I think it is today, honestly, because I mean, what I realized today is that that's probably the best thing that we could do is teach our salespeople how business works. 2 + 2 is 4, it's not 5. And so, I heard this great quote, and this is from the guy that was mentoring me when I became a correspondent lender, and he started to show me how to make a P&L work. Is you ask your average loan officer, so if at the end of a month, a branch or a company loses money, like their expenses exceeded the income, so there's a loss, where does the loss go? And when you ask most people that, they're like, I don't know. Like, well, where does it come? Like, what are we doing with that loss? Like, it's a negative number. How do we make that work? Like, because that means you didn't make enough money to cover all your expenses.
Right.
Like, how's it work? And people don't I don't know. It's like, well, do you know what a balance sheet is? Well, I've heard of a balance sheet, but I don't know what it is. Like, well, let me explain it to you. And so, like, I think that would be really valuable, but we just don't do that. We don't take the time to teach them Business 101, and I didn't know it. I mean, somebody had to teach me, right? So it's Business 101. And I think the more empowered, the more educated, not empowered, the more educated we make our loan officers, the more they'll understand and the more empowered they are. Now, that said, it's got to be transparent. And too often companies are just hiding too much. And
Yeah.
late, like mid last year, I started to like revamp all of this because like I got nothing to hide. I'm going to just show you guys everything. I'm going to show you how much money we mark up the loans. Here's the raw price. You can get the raw price anywhere, right? So here's the raw price. Here's how much I'm marking it up. This is how much it costs to run Zenith. Here's my profit target. Not hitting it, by the way, but here's my target.
You're right.
I need a fudge cushion, and then you make what you make. I'm good. Make what you make, but it's got to be transparent and it's got to be real. And I think once you start doing that, people start to feel like, okay. But the transparency is the big deal. I'm a big fan of the book. I had it on my desk here a minute ago. It's the open book management book. Can't think of the name of it. I'll think of it, but The Great Game of Business. And it's just an idea that when we don't do it, our industry's hasn't been very, you'd have to admit that the real estate industry with all of its current woes certainly been a lot more transparent financially for the players, right? For the people that are doing the business. They know what they're paying. They know what they're paying their broker. They know how much transaction makes and all of that stuff. We don't. And we don't typically. So I think there's a lot of mistrust and a lot of doubt as to where the numbers are. And it doesn't help if you're, owner's driving a Bentley or something. So it's like a Rolls Royce. And so, so I just think more transparency would really go a long way.
Yeah. Well, I got to be honest with you. And first of all, I figured that would be your answer because I knew that we would align on this. I've found myself more and more over the last many years, really, just being uber transparent with people, showing people how it works because it's just math. I will say, obviously, it's easier to be transparent when you're not making as much money because it's hey, look, and that shouldn't necessarily be the case, but that's the reality,
When I'm losing money in here, let me show you.
Yeah, exactly. So, which it's kind of funny, but it's kind of not because it just makes you realize that, there is money to be made in this business when times are good, but it's also an industry where you really need to batten down the hatches and you need to be very careful with every dollar, and it's difficult to do in a highly competitive market like the one that we're in today. I want a loan officer to get a deal, get a commission. I want my processor to process a loan and get a bonus. Like I want that loan as much as they do, but doing loans that aren't profitable also, is, to your point, that's going to push right down to the bottom line. And
I've heard this before, and there's something to be said, like, a new referral partner, a new builder, whatever, a new relationship, being a little skinny on that. There's something to be said for that for sure, but it can't be every deal without a restructure of compensation. It just can't be because 2 + 2 is not 5. It's 5.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Well, I'm glad we touched on that. I think the industry is going more and more that way. I love seeing it. I love that it's transparent because I've always been really into the financial inner workings of mortgage banking. It plays really well into kind of my strengths, and I like being able to speak that language, even with loan officers or anyone else involved in the process. And I think it educates people, and they learn something, and they have a new respect for what it is we're going through. So, okay, I love hearing that. So let's talk a little bit about really the main thing I wanted. So I was going to do an episode, Dave, and I was going to call it like, if I was starting over again today, like this is what I would do. And as I was kind of doing my episode planning, I'm like, Dave Gallegos is like the master at helping people start from scratch. But now as I think about where we're at as an industry, I don't know that it's the right time for someone to get into mortgage unless you have no expenses and a bunch of money in savings and you're ready to really commit to a learning process. It would be very difficult to start in our industry today. But as I mentioned earlier, I think there's a lot of people that feel like they're starting over. Matter of fact, some people that have been doing this for a long time that are thinking about just going and getting a regular job. And I would like to revisit the success that you had in training people and teaching them how to do this business from scratch, especially on the getting business side of it, because you had some really good best practices that I think, regardless of where you're at as far as how many years you've been in this business, if you're not hitting your goals as far as production and income, there's some things that you could put in practice today that would turn that around. And I know that a lot of the things that you had as a best practice for your new loan officers, fit that ideal. So maybe we can talk a little bit about that. And first of all, what are your thoughts? Could someone get into the business today? If you were to bring in someone brand new today, knowing what the market conditions are, what sort of things would you be looking for them or, to embody? Like what would have to be their personality traits, their commitment to this? Or would you just say, there's no way I would bring someone new in right now?
I hate to say no way, but really qualify the heck out of them. They have to be fearless, right? They have to be fearless in the face of going out and making sales calls. We'll talk about that because you and I talked about sales call reluctance and
Yeah.
They have to be fearless. They can't have any sales call reluctance, because if any sales, waiting is not one of our sales activities, right? It's like, wait. Like, you got to work. You got to make contact. It's a full contact sport. And to be clear, there's still a lot of transactions happening. I know it's slower than it's been, and we know what the MBA numbers keep coming out, and they're revising them lower all the. And I know it's slower, but there's still a lot of loans closing on every single month. And so, the consistency of the effort is the difference maker, right? It's how consistent are you with the effort, even when you're not getting the same result. Because, it used to be you'd close, you could close. Well, and it's always been like this. 80% of the people are doing 20% of the business, 20% doing 80. And then in that 20%, the 20% of those guys are doing 80% of the 20 too. And so
Right.
it keeps cycling. The best are always the best. But so I wouldn't say never, but I would say, man, they got to be fearless and they got to be really smart, because there's so much to learn on how to do a loan, right? Like, if you don't know how to do loans, if you don't know, how to qualify somebody and all the various, issues that can come up on a file and everything else. So it's a lot. I just think it's a lot. And I would prefer that I could bring them in, put them into an operations position for a while. Like, one of our rising stars here is a guy that we just did that with, and he's been here like 5 years now, but he worked his first year in ops, and he was a processor. And then he got licensed. His whole plan was to get licensed. And then it was right at the beginning of COVID. And my top producer, Giuseppe, had like massive need. And I'm like, dude, I have a proposition for you. And I said, I'll put you on this team. You can be his right hand and you will learn so much. And he learned, because they did a ton of deals. And all those reps made he's one of our best quality producers right now. And he's got the confidence that he can talk to anybody about getting them qualified. So all of that starts to play into it, even if you're fearless. But if you're making mistakes, that erodes confidence. So I still think confidence is the most important. Self-confidence and self-esteem are the most important factor in somebody's success. They have to know that they have to feel good about themselves. But, as far as the best practices are, we would say, like, you need a list of 300 people that you're going to call. And then as you call each one of those 300 people, there's like a dozen things. And I don't know if I'm going to remember all dozen, but you want to make sure you have 100% of their contact information, address, phone numbers, email addresses, their birthdays. Do they own or do they rent? If they own, who's the realtor they used? Can you get a referral? Would they use him again? Do you have a financial advisor? Would you recommend him? You don't have one. Are you looking for one? Like, there's so many other opportunities from one contact, right, that can be leveraged. And what they are, and they're just not consistent in that effort. But 10 conversations a day like that, 50 conversations a week like that. Now you're talking about 200 conversations in a month. You'll get deals. You'll have deals.
Yeah.
Right. But you got to have 200 conversations in a month.
Right.
And if you're not getting the 200 conversations, like if coach that I used to work with, still a good buddy, Mike White, it's like, if you're not doing enough business because you're not talking to enough people.
Right. One of the things, Dave, I remember you saying is that you would work with someone who wanted to become a loan officer, and before they even started, you would have them make that list of 300. Let's talk about that list really quick, because I think this is a list that a lot of people never made when they got in the mortgage industry. I bet there's people that have been doing this for 5 years that never made a list like that, and they could create a database today, because some people, a lot of people talking about your database, a lot of people talking about refinance opportunities, a lot of people talking about connecting with your database. But what if you don't have one? what you help people do is create a database before they even started. So what went in, like, who were those 300 people? Like you had mentioned to me,
I had A,
like
B's, and C's, there were A, B's, and C contacts. So like the A contacts are probably on a 300-person list. Maybe there's 25 to 50.
Okay.
People that that were like, that guy for sure will get a mortgage for me if he needs a mortgage, right? 25 to 50 of the 300.
Now, hold on. So if you're new to the business, though, these are just what, friends, family?
Yeah, friends, family, like your buddies, your neighbors, your mom's friends, your like, I mean, like, I know these people so well that I'm 99% sure that if they needed a mortgage, they'd be willing to listen to me. And then, so who's on that list in your life? Just tell me who's on that list. And you've got a new career going. If they like you, they should be excited and happy for you. So you're going to call them and let them know, hey, here's what I'm doing. It's not that complicated. And so, and when I call them A's, I'm talking about in terms of probability of they know your name, they like you, and they would probably do business with you. And then the next group of people on the list are the people that know your name and you think they like you. You're not sure if they get a mortgage from you. And then the third group of people on the list is like, I know who they are. I'm not sure they even know my name, but I'm going to call them. And so I had a guy still here, and we were laughing. We still laugh about this. He called the ex-girlfriend of one of his buddies that he found on Facebook. He didn't really even know her, but they knew each other. He did a loan for her. She's given him like 5 referrals over the years. He just laughs about it. He goes like, yeah, I was calling everybody. You said to call everybody I knew, so I called everybody I knew. And that's where the fearless part kicks in, is you can't be afraid of making a call. You can't have that sales call reluctance because part of that comes from, you want something and you don't want to ask for something and be rejected. That's the sales call reluctance definition, right? And so, but if you think about what you do differently and you say, I'm just letting people know this is what I do and I can help people who want to do it. And like, if you don't own a home, you want to. Very few people say, nah, I don't want to own a home. And the people who own a home will take a better mortgage if a better one's available. So that means everybody you know and see and come in contact with is a potential customer. And so you just have to know you do this.
Yeah. I remember you had shared with me like one idea, a way to think about it was when you're building that list, think about like if you were getting married, like who's everyone that you would invite to the wedding, like that, like a 200-person wedding, right? Like there's a good list of people. And then like you said, your friends, family, past coworkers, people you went to school with, I think whatever. So look, you guys, if you don't have a database, you need to build one, and it's a huge mistake. Yeah.
Yeah. In this business, and then you should have a great database. And so if you don't, I mean, that's a cornerstone of a really successful origination practice is the list. I mean, your list, your sphere of influence, that's the value. That's your equity. You should be able to get, what's the number out of every 100 names, 7 loans a year. Out of every 100 people on that list, there's 7 moves or 7 opportunities a year. So if you have a 500-person database, well, shit, that's 35 loans and you haven't had any realtor business yet, right? So there's no reason why you don't have a 500-person list after being in the business a few years.
Yeah, you're doing 3 loans a month and you haven't even got a referral yet from a realtor. So, all right. So best practices though, as far as, so I love that, making those outbound calls, figuring out, where they rank, and everyone's a candidate for, potential transaction or referral. But you also taught everyone, and correct me if I'm wrong, but to use Mortgage Coach or some type of a presentation tool mandatory. Is this like a requirement for your loan officers, or at least a best practice?
You're brand new. It's like you're using Mortgage Coach. I'm not going to teach you how to present. You're going to learn how to present. And I've always liked Mortgage Coach so much. Is Savage paying you to do this? I like Mortgage Coach. I like mortgage. Is this being underwritten by Mortgage Coach? I've always been a huge fan of Mortgage Coach. When I first got it, when I first started using it, that's when I graduated from being a transactional. I was probably more transactional, even though I was relational, till I become a really good advisor of people because I could show people how mortgages work and how to structure the most cost-effective mortgage based on rates and fees. because I couldn't know how to explain it before. And then when I could see it, I got all jacked up. I got jazzed up about it. Like, I can show, let me show you something. Let me show you how much money I used to get really into it. And the customers
Yeah.
are like, thanks, man. And so instead of just like, here's your loan and here's a rate and here's your payment. And that's not, you're not really being a loan officer. You're more like a Quicken loan officer where you're just, quoting a rate and let me know if you want to lock. And
Right.
that's it. They can get that anywhere. And so that's not what we do. And that's not the business that you're in this channel, in this business channel.
Yeah. Well, and the reason I bring up Mortgage Coach is, look, I think that being an advisor to your clients is the most important thing. If anyone can quote a rate, if that's what you're doing, is just saying, hey, I do loans and this is my rate, and you're going to commoditize yourself and you're going to compete head to head with every other, company out there that's just offering a rate, then you're going to have a very difficult and frustrating career in the mortgage industry. I think if you can shift the conversation with your clients from, look, I am a consultant who helps people choose the right mortgage solution to meet their short and long-term needs, and I have a process in which I help you uncover what those goals are, and I have a presentation that's going to give you some options that are going to help you accomplish those goals. I don't know another way to present options that way than to use a mortgage coach or some other type of manual spreadsheets that you might be building. So,
And there's some guys that build their own manual spreadsheets because they don't like mortgage coach. I'm like, what don't you like?
well, and there's other, look, MBS Highway has some too. Look, I don't care what you use. It's not an endorsement of mortgage. I just always use Mortgage Coach in my business, and it's so easy. And the reason I bring it up is because I think there's still loan officers today. So here it is, you were training brand new people. They have a database built. They have probably spent some time in operations, or at least mirrored people in operations, and they use a Mortgage Coach presentation for every deal. I would just ask you, for those three things, if you're a loan officer.
Yeah, the fourth one.
Okay, what's the fourth one?
Yeah, the fourth one, and this, shame on me because we weren't doing enough of this until recently, and we just started to get back into it, is role playing and scripting. And doing actual role playing and scripting classes with the newer people that are here. And we're getting together once a week and we're practicing scripting for how to cold call a realtor. Like, okay, if you're in a cold call, and you don't have to, I'm not a big, you can warm up a cold call by doing some interacting with people on social media first. And, there's a bunch of different, like Ninja Selling has the 8x8 campaigns that you can, there's a bunch of ways that you can warm up a call. But when it's time to make the call, you still got to make the call, and you got to be scripted and ready to go, and you have to have answers to objections. And our industry, Tony, I don't know about you, how much training you did like that. I have to be honest with you that I never did a lot of that training with any of these guys other than go make some more calls and get some appointment, and we did some scripting, but just not as much as I should have. And I've corrected that this year, and I've spent a lot more time with guys doing some role playing and training, and it's actually been, the results, shockingly, the results have been great. People are like, oh, so if I practice, I can get better. It's just, Kobe Bryant said that. It's like, well, if you just practice more hours, it's math, you'll get better. So why don't you just practice and so we've done that. And so that is one more thing that I would add to it is, I believe in the power of scripting, and you do need to memorize your script, and then you need to internalize, not memorize it. You need to internalize your script so that you can deliver it like the way you and I talk.
Right.
And so it doesn't sound like you're reading it. You can't sound like you're reading the script, and you have to be ready for the objections that are inevitable because you're going to get objections. And so that's part of, what we were talking about, overcoming sales call reluctance, is that if you don't know what you're going to say, and you don't know how you're going to overcome the objections, and you just sound like terrible when you call somebody, and you sound like you're not sure of you can't sound like you're not confident because they smell it on you. You can't sound desperate, right? So that's where a lot of the practicing and the role playing have been a bit of a game changer for us, for people just having the confidence to make more calls, because you got to overcome that.
Well, and really, when you're making a sales call, I think the goal is to get to the objection, because you're never going to get to the sale until you get to the objection. And so, you better be ready to deal with that objection. It's funny. I was very fortunate in, I was, as much as I went to sales mastery and some of the other stuff, by referral only was a big part of my training. I went to a lot of buy referral only events and it was in their coaching and stuff like that. And there's a lot of scripting in buy referral only. Matter of fact, if you just go to YouTube or the internet and look up buy referral only, like so much of it is, there's so much of Joe Stump's content out there. And I think I
wrote down what you said. You're not even selling until you get the objection. You haven't sold anything until you get the objection. Now you're selling. That's good.
It is true. But the thing is about the scripting is I've always been really big on scripts. And what I hear from loan officers a lot is, I'm not big into scripts. I don't want to sound like I'm reading a script. Like that's what telemarketers do. And it's such a miss. It's such a miss if you think that way, because you said it, you got to internalize it. It's not about the script as far as reading a script word for word. It's about knowing how you're going to counter a particular objection and being prepared for it, and then moving beyond that onto the next objection, because there's going to be more than one if you're doing your job right. It's the person who has no objections and says, yeah, that sounds good, that shops you at the end, right? Because you didn't get to the point of their answering their questions earlier in the process.
I was just thinking as you were saying that all of us are attracted to the most confident people in the room, right? So like you want to do business with the person who sounds like they're, you know what, I'm going with that guy. He really sounds like he knows what he's talking about. And you might not know anything about mortgages, but you sound like you know everything there is to know. And you're able to answer my objection like, no, I don't want to meet. Here's why. It's like, oh, well, let me tell you, I just worked with a client who did just that. And he did this. And so we did that. And it helped him. Let's get together. Let's just set a time to review this. Like, you know what? Maybe we should get together. And like, I like that guy. Like, why do you like him? I don't know. I just do. It's like, because he sounds like he knows what he's talking about. And then the more confident you are, people will do whatever you tell them. I used to do this all the time. I still like doing it. I'm not going to do it to you. It'll be really fun though on this podcast. It's like, hey, Tony, could you stand up for a minute? And then I'd get to just real quick, stand up. It's okay. Go ahead and stand up. And then you'd stand up and I'm like, see, people will do whatever you tell them as long as you sound like you know what you're talking about. And people will do it. I've done it in crowds. I've done it in big groups. But like going, here, let me show you real quick. Just stand up for a second. I want to show you something. Just stand up. And they're like, oh, okay, I'll stand up. And I'm like, okay, see, people do whatever you tell them if you sound like you know what you're talking about. And it's true. Clients and real estate agents, especially if you're making a sales call, are the same way. They want to work with the most confident person who sounds like they're genuinely interested in trying to help them and not get something in return. Like, I just want to see if I can help. And if people feel like you're trying to get something from them, then that's where you get the resistance, I think.
Yeah, 100%. Well, I love that. So look, if you're a loan officer who's been in this business you're brand new, you got in during COVID, or you've been in for 5 years or 10 years or whatever it is, but you're not hitting your numbers, those 4 things that, making sure your database is dialed. If you don't have one, create one. There's plenty of people in your life to build that database and start making, those phone calls and the scripting and the practicing. We've been doing more and more of that in our training here and in our region as well. And I know there's some really great stuff out there to learn scripts, and I love that you guys are doing it kind of internally. That's huge. So we've touched on call reluctance a couple times. I don't know if there's any other areas. I had it written down to talk to you about, because I know this is something that you've been working on, and then we're going to talk about your social media a little bit, because you've been doing some videos and talking about this. So is there anything on call reluctance that we didn't touch on that are kind of big ahas or big things that you've come to realize that would help people overcome call reluctance? Because I think people hate to think that they might have it, but the reality is if you're not on the phone selling a couple hours a day, then chances are it's because you have call reluctance and you're finding other things to work on besides the prospecting that you should be doing if your pipeline isn't full. So what else about call reluctance, Dave, do you think is relevant?
So there's times when first of all, what I know is that everybody experiences it. It's not the best salespeople have sales call reluctance sometimes, because it's just a natural human thing. Nobody likes rejection, right? So, and you know that when you pick up the phone to call strangers, there's a really good chance you're going to get some rejection. So so that's the first thing. Nobody's alone in this, is what I've learned, and I've studied this, and I've done some research online, and I just go back to the very first sales job I ever had in my sales career. I was 19 years old, and I got a job, really sketchy job, working in a boiler room, selling advertising specialties like pens with name, your
Oh, okay. Yeah.
and stuff, and baseball caps and bumper stickers. It was totally sketch, and it was like this pitch where, you won a trip to Vegas and all you have to do is buy a box of pens, that kind of thing. It was really bad. And the companies were all headquartered in Vegas. I think the mob ran them. I don't know. But I was 19 and I didn't know anything. I just knew I didn't want somebody to tell me how much money I was going to make. I wanted to make what I could earn. And so now you just have to imagine this. We were calling mom and pop businesses across the country, and we started in Denver. We'd come to work at 5 o'clock in the morning. It's 7 a.m. on the East Coast. And this was back in the days of Watts lines. You remember Watts lines? So like 800, like you probably are too young. Their Watts lines were like the old, like bulk long distance plans. So you paid for a Watts line and it was cheaper than just dialing the phone. And there was no, wireless, anything, everything. And we got the list of who to call. The boiler room had like a wall in the office that was just loaded up with yellow pages. And you'd go and grab the yellow pages for Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and you'd open it up to body shops, and you'd just start calling the body shops. And you always liked it because if you could get Tony's Body Shop, you thought, oh, sweet, I'm going to ask for Tony. Because if it was Quality Auto Body, you didn't know the owner's name, right? So you had to ask for the owner when you called. But like, is Tony there? And they're like, Tony died. And like, oh, shit. But it was, so what they did that was really smart is that they got more salespeople than they had phone lines, right? And so they would their goal was to hire at least 3 salespeople for every 2 phone lines. And they would put a clock on the wall, and it would look like this. It was like a peace sign. Actually, that's wrong. Hang on. It was like this. I have to show you because it's really important.
Okay.
It looks like a clock. There you go.
Yeah, I can see it. Yeah.
Okay, so the first section is the top of the hour till 20 minutes after. The second section is 20 minutes after to 40 minutes. And the third section is 40 to the top of the hour. There's 2 lines. There's 3 salespeople. So only 2 guys can be on the phone at the beginning of the shift. Only 2 guys can be on the phone. And if you were the unlucky guy that you only got 20 minutes, because then you had to take a 20-minute break. You had to get off the phone, and the other guy, the third guy, was getting on the phone, and he was going to get the dial for 40 minutes. And then the first guy that's been on the phone for 40 minutes, the third guy is waiting. I'm waiting. I'm like, dude, get off the phone. Get off the phone. It's my turn. It's my turn. Because we could only dial from 5 p.m. to 1 p.m., and then we had to close because it got more expensive later in the day. Dude, all you did was dial another number. If they hung up on you, you're laughing. You're like, the guy hung up on me, dial somebody else. And if you could get somebody to listen to your pitch and you could sell them a box of like 100 pens, I think the most I could make was $200 a day, which would be $1,000 a week. And I'd be like, man, I'll be rolling in it if I'm making 50 grand. I'll be rich. And I was rich at 50 grand. And
well, adjusted for inflation, I mean,
1979, dude, I got a Corvette and everything. And so, I had to lease it, but I looked good, and it was more than my rent. So, but that practice eliminated sales call reluctance. Like, I don't care. I'm gonna just call because I had so many people to call, and so that's the only way. The only way to overcome sales call reluctance is the same way you jump into an ice cold lake. You just got to jump in and go, and pretty soon the water won't be that cold, and you just had fun with it. You called as many people as you could call in 40 minutes, and then you were off for 20, and then you get back on the phone for another 40 minutes, and you only got to do that, from 5 a.m. to noon or 1, and then you were off, and so. Sometimes every hour, like if you could sell 2 boxes of pens a day or 3 boxes of pens a day, it was a great day, right? And so you dialed so many, I don't know how many, we weren't keeping track of how many dials we made or anything, but it was just pound the phone, pound the phone, pound the phone. Today in mortgage lending, I mean, that's really what we ought to be doing, and not to that level of intensity, but just think if you didn't have that unlimited ability to call as many people as you want, right? And because that's what you have. You have unlimited ability to call as many people as you want, and you don't call anybody. Like if you don't talk to three people today and you worked all day, like you didn't do anything.
Right. Well, and like to your point, everybody out there either has a mortgage, knows someone that needs help with their mortgage, is someone who would be open to refinancing if the opportunity presented itself, might need equity out of their home, might have some sort of life event going on where unfortunately they may need to abandon their super low interest rate and get a new rate for whatever reason. You'll never know if you don't talk to them. Or they're renting and they would like to get onto a path to purchase a home. Even if today's not the day, you can start them on that journey. So there's really no reason not to be calling people. I mean, I would agree, you don't want to be a boiler room type of a deal, but the analogy is that the making calls all day is really the only way that you have to connect with the outside world. So that's what you should be doing. But
my wife, once I started doing this, I would come home and my wife would go like, "Did you lock a loan today?" I was like, "No, you don't lock loans every day." She goes, "I don't get it." I said, "You know what? Shut up." She goes, "If you didn't go to work to lock a loan, I don't understand. Like, what did you do all day that you didn't get a loan? Because like, isn't that how you get paid?" I'm like, "Okay, I got it."
100%. All right. Well, in the last little bit here, Dave, I want to talk to you a little bit about social media, because it probably is the only other way that you're going to get your name out there and create some influence for yourself. Now, I will say, I don't think you're going to get a lot. Some people do get some leads off of their social media, and it's a real art. But I think everyone should be doing it to some extent. I watch your videos. You've started putting out some different training. You put out some different videos. So, first of all, maybe talk a little bit about what you've been doing, and what do you think loan officers should be doing? I mean, look, you did this business for many, many years, never were on social media. Now you're doing it. I'm the same way. I've been 26 years in the mortgage business, started a podcast 2 years ago. So, I think that there's value in kind of what led you to realize like, hey, I want to start doing some video content. I want to get it out there. And what's your advice for other loan officers that want to get started building, a presence on social media?
So many loan officers. I was one of them. Some of them was like, I don't like social media. I don't want to spend all my time on social media. It's like, yeah, I don't spend that much time on social media, but you wouldn't know it to see how much I'm doing. And so it's just figuring out your process for how you're leveraging, same as you. Like I started 2 podcasts, one called Make the Call, another one called More Than Mortgage for Consumers. And I heard this, so I would give props to Amir Syed from Go Coaching and to Mo Ismail, who also is there. They've given me like a whole different perspective on this that I didn't ever have. And that was, it's not social media, it's business media, number one. And number two is you're going to be seen before you're known. So like when a loan officer gives a name when a realtor gives a customer a name, that customer is going to go check you out before he calls you.
Right.
Every time. He's going to check Facebook. He's going to check LinkedIn. He might check Instagram. I don't know. But LinkedIn and Facebook, if it's professional, they're going to check something, and they're going to Google your name. And they're going to look to see what's out there about you, whether you like it or not. And so when I first heard that, I went, oh, crap. I should probably have a lot more information out there. And then just everything that I've read about the subject is just like, it's just the world we live in now. It's like you are going to have more influence. You'll have more influence than you realize you're going to have. And it's a long-term play, but it doesn't need to take hours and hours a day. A lot of people think it's going to take way more time than it is, but you have to stay consistent. And, if you want to warm up a cold call, develop a relationship online with a referral partner before you ever try to contact them, and then make contact after you've, properly shown real respect. Like if it just seems like you just want something, it's repelling. Like, I'm like, I don't want to talk to somebody who obviously just wants to sell me something. And like, if somebody's genuinely interested in what I'm doing and is complimentary and and then I check them out because I check something like going, oh, this guy looks legit, right? So those are phone calls that are worth making. And I just think it's just the way the world works. And it's a mistake. I believe it's a mistake to think that you're going to have, you're going to figure out a way to, I'm sure there's, the exception to this, but I just think it's a mistake to not invest some time. And that's the cost of it, is some time investment and maybe a little bit of money on, paying for an editor or whatever to do it. Cause that's all I'm doing is I'm doing these podcasts and then they're chopping them up into, posts that are online. And I'm going to be doing, dude, I'm going to do more. I get it now. It's like, oh, okay. This is about how big is your reach and how big is your influence.
Yeah, no, 100%. Well, yeah, no, I love it. I've been doing the same thing. I'd love to continue to grow ours as well. But look, guys, I know that Dave, you got a meeting to get to. I appreciate your time here, and I hope that if you're in the audience listening to this, you had some takeaways. There was some real nuggets here that I think anyone could take away from this. And the reality is I know, unfortunately, that there's a lot of loan officers that are really good loan officers that are passionate and love this industry that are just simply not hitting the numbers that they want to hit. And the whole reason I wanted to have Dave on here is because there's some real obvious, I would say easy, but obvious and easy if you get the practice in, things that you can do that will jumpstart and propel your business. And they're the same things that we would teach someone who's a brand new loan officer into the industry. And even if you're a veteran, but you're not doing them today, they're easy things to start building into your daily routine. And now is not the time to be a part-time loan officer. Now is not the time to, spend all your time working on the challenges that might happen with a loan or the process or whatever. It's the time should be spent on prospecting, getting really good at prospecting, putting in the calls, getting to that objection so that you can overcome it and move closer to a sale. And if nothing else, connecting with people that you're putting into a database and staying in touch with a more closer relationship than you had before. So there's lots of ways to do it. Any final thoughts, Dave, before we wrap this episode?
No, other than I guess the last thing is like, just make sure you're going out there with the heart of a teacher and the heart of somebody who just really wants to help. You try to talk somebody into a refinance of their 3.5% interest rate loan, who really would be okay with a HELOC, but you need that freaking loan. And you're trying to dude, that will hurt you in the long run. Get them the HELOC. Be ready for it. Just help. Just have that approach. Don't try to talk somebody into doing something that's good for you, but not for them. That will pay you back in spades and always will. The customer will always remember you did what was best for them. And I think that's where this business just builds on itself and pyramids. And I think too often it's easy. You just got to stay focused on that thing. You're like, we're here to help people. They don't know what they're doing. Biggest transactions of their lives. Take care of them, and it always pays. It always pays.
Well, I 100% agree with that, and I will say that having a pipeline, making the calls, having leads coming in is what allows you to be able to focus on giving the best advice, knowing that there's another opportunity right after this one because you've put in the work on your prospecting. Having a scarcity mindset, trying to make every lead because you get one lead a week and you have to make it work. Like that the way you overcome that is you up your prospecting, you up your amount of leads coming in, and then you can focus on giving great advice. And then to your point, that snowballs into referrals and all of the other things.
And that customer will be your best friend for life because you just gave them like, hey, I don't get paid for this, but I'm telling you, don't do this, do that. And the customer's like, wow, thank you. Because that's a big deal. Most people don't do that. Most people try to do it anyway.
Yeah.
So that's solid.
100%. Dave, I'm glad we got this on the books. I'm glad we were able to connect. I always appreciate.
Sorry about the last one.
Hey, yeah, well, hey, it's all good. I'll make sure that I no show when you invite me on your podcast too. So, no, I'm just kidding.
I'll make sure I like, okay, I'm going to book you on this first one, but I'm not really expecting you. It'll be the next one.
Exactly. For those of you in the audience, I hope you had fun with this conversation. Check out Dave's social media. Really quick, Dave, where can they find your podcast that you're doing? Facebook.
Yeah, on all of the podcast channels. Make the Call, and then for salespeople, and then More Than Mortgage for consumers. Thank you.
Okay, Make the Call. There you go. So if you're having call reluctance, go check that out and listen to what Dave has to say there. And you guys, thank you for your time. It's the one thing you can't get back. I hope you found value in watching this episode. If you did, please tell someone about market shares. That's the one thing that I could ask, is for that referral, letting people know who we are, what we are, and the content that we're putting out. And if you like the episode, I drop a new one every single Friday at 10 a.m. Pacific time. So please subscribe to make sure you don't miss one. And we'll see you next time. Take care.